Hello, this is Cynthia Sue Larson, and today I'm with Seán Ó Nualláin, who holds a PhD in computer science from Trinity College, Dublin, Ireland, and he was a visiting scholar at Walter Freeman's lab at UC Berkeley, and also faculty at Cal and Stanford. He is the author of several books, including one magisterium, and he runs the Foundations of Mind project. So, hello, Seán.
Hi, Cynthia.
And I've got a question for you today. It's a simple question, but profound, basically. And you can answer it either in the moment or in general. You can go as deep with it as you like. But I'd like to know what it is that you know for sure, or pretty much for sure, that most people really don't seem to be aware of, but that could positively transform their lives.
Absolutely nothing. I have no such knowledge. But what I have to add is maybe the fact that there is no such knowledge. There is none. We're living in a very postmodern environment where there are myriad narratives. People find all kinds of ways of living their lives, and if there's one thing that characterizes the age we live in, it's diversity. It's extraordinary diversity. Ironically, I can answer with respect to science. I can answer that I know a lot of things about how science could be done that actually would make it much more efficient, would lead to much better results.
Let's go there.
Sure. So I think the first thing I would say with respect to science is that the problem has been an inability to cater to levels of being, that there are different modalities of being in the world. We have quantum level physical reality, classical level physical reality. The classical level physical reality, we eventually have chemical constraints there. There is a biological level. Biological level becomes symbolic. And then we've got the people level, the intentional level. Now, I'm just saying this in a very neutral way. There is no emotion, there's no feeling here. It's just strikes me that there are really, really important consequences of this.
And some people are not clear on this, I take it. So your point being that there's often confusion?
My point being is that there is indeed confusion and huge wastage as a result. So they, for example, genomics projects tend to think of the genome as basically a simple data mining endeavor where they're going to find a killer string of nucleotides that ends up in expression of a particular protein, which is going to make some company billions. All that low-hanging fruit is gone. So they need a new paradigm for biology. Similarly, in machine translation, even a really good company like Google, the results are embarrassing using the primitive techniques that they use, which doesn't really take account of the complexity of the human mind.
And so by taking account of the complexity, I gather you're talking about these levels that you presented earlier, these different levels of, is that a good summary?
I would say that with respect to biology, I take account of the levels of being. I take account of the fact that the biological is discontinuous from the physical. But with humans, we get something quite different. We get at the intentional level, the level that we function at. We get systems which we have been able to characterize in the past. The reason that we can characterize the human mind is we know how the human mind operates in physics.
Yes.
We know that actually, for example, Einstein needed fourth-order tensors to actually describe the curved space which constitutes the substratum for the general theory of relativity. Therefore, the mind cannot be simpler than a fourth-order tensor. That is just a very, very simple logical conclusion.
But people haven't been using that premise with research.
No, in fact, they've been using, when possible, linear models. For example, the Google Machine Translate system, it just basically has this template sentence that it tries to project everything onto, and it's actually become a farce. There was one hilarious incident in Ireland which almost caused the government to fall because they used Google Translate to translate the Irish Declaration of Independence from English to Irish. And this is true. This did happen. You can check all this. Google it. Yeah.
Okay, so when you're talking about linear, you mean, because language, a lot of people don't think that's a linear thing, but I guess there's a linear quality to it, is what you're talking about. So if you could give an example of the fourth order tensor, so the average person sitting at home kind of gets what you're talking about.
Sure. If we actually look at the notion of a tensor needs to be unpacked, and tensors are absolutely critical to my thinking, actually. So the tensors come in various orders. A first, let's call this a 0th order tensor, is basically something like a number, or it's something like a specific location in the brain. So you could argue that what fMRI has been doing is just basically working at scalars or 0 order tensors.
Yes.
Then we have vectors, which are first order tensors. And vectors are pretty well known, they're pretty well used. The problem is that they really, a lot of the representations that cognitive science has been using has actually been scalar or very simple vector representations. Now, after vector, we get more complicated tensors until we come up to the kind of tensors that Einstein used to describe the curvature of space-time. And so what this actually means is that there's an assumption of vector representation in even the best computational linguistics work. And that has turned out to be too simple. So this is, again, if I've got one earth-shattering idea, it's not about telling people how to live their lives, because the time has really gone past. I mean, don't destroy the environment, try to be kind to others, be a good citizen. Those are...
No, I'm not saying it's anything you think you know for sure is fine.
Yeah, that's. But I think that it's actually really gone past. We've gone maybe 1,000 years past the time where it was actually useful to do that. But with respect to science, I actually think that when you start doing it properly, when you start looking at this great levels of being that exists out there, the phenomenal emanation from the absolute which everything consists of, you end up with something magnificent, and something that means also that the science we have at the moment is based on failure. It's based on PIs writing research grant after research grant to not solve the same problem.
Well, thank you so much for presenting this today. This is a real short thing, so
It was my pleasure.